Morning everyone. So our next guest doesn't really need much of an introduction, but one thing you don't know, she was a Warehouse Project resident. She's DJ'd at High in Ibiza, best mates with Fisher, the DJ, international DJ. Even her haircut makes the front page of the press. Delighted to introduce you to Angela Rayner.
Thank you everyone, and thank you for being here. The people who keep our towns and cities alive when the lights come on and not when they go out. And to be here in Liverpool, what better place for this summit? A city that's a cultural icon in its own right. The home of the Beatles, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and the Lightning Seeds. And also Camel Fat, and I've also danced to a few of their bangers over the times as well. And the legendary nightclub, of course, Cream, and later the Creamfields Festival. I want to start on a personal note, because the nighttime economy isn't an abstract concept to me. It's not a spreadsheet or a briefing note. It's something I've relied on and lived and loved. I grew up in a working class household. Opportunities didn't come easy. Like millions of people across the country, my early working life was shaped by hospitality, by late shifts, by weekends and by graft. People know I was working in the care sector as a home help, but they might not know that, like so many of you, I also worked in a pub, the Malt Shovels in Cheadle. Unfortunately, it's not there anymore. Pubs, clubs and venue bars, these places weren't just where I worked, they were where I found my confidence, community and culture. They were spaces where people like me learned how to show up, how to perform and how to belong. And yes, I still love a night out. I always have, because nightlife at its best is joyful. It's creative, it's social, it's human, and it matters. The nighttime economy is not a sideshow, it is a cornerstone of who we are as a country. Economically, its contribution is enormous, supporting millions of jobs, driving tourism, powering local economies, and sustaining supply chains that stretch far beyond our high streets. But its value goes far deeper than GDP. The UK's global identity, our music, our fashion, our arts, our cultural influence is inseparable from what happens after dark. People come to this country because our venues, our screens, our creativity. They come to perform here, to learn here, to start their careers here. For generations, the UK has been a cultural launchpad to the world. And that didn't happen by accident, it happened because we created spaces, often grassroots, often fragile, often independent, where talent could take risks and community could gather. And that is why what happens to this sector now matters so deeply. Because let's be honest with each other, the nighttime economy has endured years of hardship. Long before the pandemic, businesses were already under pressure. Then COVID hit the sector hard and fast, with the shock impact still felt today, with the nighttime economy having shrunk by 30% compared to before the pandemic struck. And since then, it's been a story of rising costs, energy bills, staffing shortages, inflation, business rates and debt, creating a perfect storm. The real human and business impacts are stark. As numbers of nightclubs, once a haven for our youth, have declined in this country by 30% since 2019, and over 75,000 jobs were lost in the sector between 2024 and 2025 alone. And while resilience is something this industry has in abundance, the burden of recovery cannot just fall solely at its feet. The burden must be shared. Over 70% of this sector is made up of small and medium-sized enterprises, independents, grassroots venues, family fund and run businesses. These are not faceless corporations. They're people who are taking risks, employing locally, investing emotionally and financially in their communities. And if we're serious about recovery, then we must fuel the recovery of them. That means recognising the value, not just in rhetoric, but in policy. And this is where we must be candid. There is without doubt a clear divide between policy that truly understands the nighttime economy and policy that simply applies a one-size-fits-all approach. Too often, policy is done to this sector, not with it. And I recognise clearly and openly that more needs to be done to engage the industry directly and consistently and respectfully, to listen, to co-design, to recognise expertise where it exists. Because confidence in politics matters. Businesses need to believe that they will be treated fairly, that the rules won't shift without warning, that the long-standing structural issues will finally be addressed, not deferred again. That means looking seriously at the pressure points. Over the last few weeks, I've spoken candidly with businesses in my own constituency and many beyond it. And they say it's a huge challenge that they're facing and that it's a challenge just to stay afloat. Customers aren't just there in the same way as they used to be, as business rates remain punishingly high, energy bills soar, and costs in your supply chains and VAT bites. Across Europe, governments recognise that hospitality and nightlife required extended support, not handouts, but as investment. Now the government needs to plan to aid recovery, to stabilise the costs, to give businesses breathing space. I believe the government should look at how to support the night economy to thrive once again, more seriously. Not ideology, but pragmatically. But economic reform alone is not enough. We also need to look at how the system enables, or too often restricts, this sector's ability to thrive. That means licensing. The government should be working towards a more enabling, more permissive approach to licensing, one that recognises the value of well-run venues and trusts them as partners, not problems. A system that is proportionate, efficient and rooted in partnership rather than constant friction. And I'm delighted today to see the Mayor of London hit this forward, announcing today a London-wide strategic licensing policy to boost the capital's vital hospitality and nightlife industries, something that I pushed for when I was Deputy Prime Minister and Secretary of State. And we now need to see more of this, and it means planning. More efficient, responsive planning process is essential if we want to encourage investment. Businesses need clarity, certainty and pace, not years of delay and a drain in confidence and capital. And at the same time, we must harness the power of the agent of change principle. And done well, it protects communities and businesses, ensuring that long-standing venues are not pushed out by poorly planned development, while neighbourhoods remain livable and safe. And this is not an either-or, it's about balance, fairness and long-term thinking. The 24-hour economy can't just be an afterthought, and it must mean joining the dots with public transport too. For those wanting affordability to go out on the night out and get home again, and of course those workers who can have to afford and rely on those transport routes as well, the night bus network, now in place in Manchester, has been transformative for the nighttime sector. Just as in London, workers can afford to get safely and affordably to and from work. This is something that shouldn't be a luxury in our major cities, but a necessity in supporting our high streets and the 24-hour economy. And alongside this, ensuring that workers in the sector have a minimum shift pattern is crucial. And if shifts are cut short, They should still be paid. It's not fair to send staff home without work and without pay on quiet nights. Workers deserve fairness and should not be exploited. And while we address our economic challenges, we cannot ignore the social ones. For too many people, and in particular women, a night out no longer feels safe. That is unacceptable. Safety is not an optional extra, it's a fundamental to the future of our nighttime economy. We must do more to make our streets feel safer late at night. That means robust, visible policing. It means tackling predatory behaviour head on. It means changing environments, lighting, design, staffing, transport to reduce vulnerability and build confidence. And let me be clear, transport is not just infrastructure, it's a safety enabler. People decide whether to go out based on whether they can get home safely. It really is that simple. I know this firsthand, and I know many of you do too. And if we want thriving nights, we need joined up thinking between central government and local authorities and local government, between transport, policing, regulations and businesses themselves. Because these are not separate conversations, they are the same one. And there's a bigger conversation we need to have about culture itself. We rightly celebrate our heritage. We protect historic buildings. But cultural value does not only live in bricks and mortar. Some of our most important cultural movements were born in basements, warehouses, clubs and temporary spaces. They were not designed to last forever, but their impact has. We need to start recognising the difference between a building and a cultural movement. That means protecting our cultural heritage, not just through listing processes, but through new ways of recognising intangible cultural assets, like how UNESCO acknowledges cultural significance beyond physical structures. Because not all cultural value sits in old buildings. We should be proud of our nightlife, proud of our live music, proud of our electronic music and our DJs and artists who are breaking boundaries globally, proud of the spaces where people refined their craft before the world took notice. These places are part of our national story and they deserve protection, recognition and support. And that is why I would support the government in having a named minister with responsibility for the nighttime economy to champion the sector inside government and ensure that the voices of small and medium businesses are heard loud and clear. And this was called for in the NTIA manifesto, Darkest Before the Dawn. And other countries have led the way on this. And now we should learn from those countries and those successes and give the nighttime economy and the hundreds of thousands of businesses in its true champion on the national stage. I've seen the best of this sector close up. The venues in this room, the spaces you represent are extraordinary. They command global respect. They drive the visitor economy. They make the UK a cultural and social powerhouse that is envied worldwide. So I want to leave you with this. We need to do better. We need to recognise the value of this industry economically, culturally, socially. We need to design policy with the industry and not for it. And we need to create an environment, both economic and cultural, where businesses have the confidence to invest and grow, and that communities can thrive, and people can believe in the amazing nightlife that this country has to offer. Because when the nightlife thrives, we all prosper. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gents, thank you very much, Angela Rayner. We're just going to do a little bit of a stage transition and then we're going to do a bit of a Q&A. If you can give us a couple of minutes and everyone stay in place.
2. 1, 2. 1, 2.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. I'm just going to welcome Angela back on stage. Thank you very much. And if you could give her a round of applause, an amazing speech, backing our nighttime economy is one is so, so important.
What's this for? You plug in something.
One of our suppliers can't help themselves and put a business card on the table as if they know.
Savage.
Cheeky. Listen, you've all heard that amazing speech. Thank you so much. And, you know, obviously talking about our manifesto and the importance of having representation in central government is massive. I've had the privilege of spending some time in more casual environments with you. Funny enough, the pub, which was great. And I know you candidly to a point, so and I know that your passion is within this sector as a whole. So I'll be given the opportunity to do a bit of a Q&A, so I'm going to sort of get straight to it. I mean, you spoke very personally about your experiences where you've worked in the pub and things like that, and I really want to ask, how's that shaped where you are today, your confidence, how you sort of positioned yourself? I'm really keen to understand how important that has been in terms of your life journey.
Yeah, thank you. I think, you know, my background is well known, but I said that I learned and honed my skills because I've always worked with people, and I started off right at the beginning. I worked at a kebab shop called Tasty Place in Aswood, and that was great, and I was about 16 at the time. And I learned how to deal with customers, I learned the challenges when someone's not so happy, I learned the differences with people, again, working at Mold Shovels. That was a real eye-opener, the loneliness that was out there even then. I think that's got worse now in society, and the spaces where people can gather and meet, the old guys. People. So when I went into politics, I'd already, been a carer. I'd been a Samaritan for a period of time, and all around my career, I've always worked with people, and you learn what matters most, and why we do what we do. And it's about experiences, it's about memories, and it's about caring for each other in your community. So you need these spaces where people can come together. And I think at some of my best moments in my life and some of my worst moments in my life, the hospitality industry has always been part of it, and has been there to pick me up, or have been there to give me the warmth, the security. You go around and it's heartbreaking to see venues that you've known for donkey's years that are disappearing, and it feels like part of your community, part of your childhood, part of what your memories are disappearing with it. So I feel really passionate about making sure we protect the industry, because it is economically really important to Britain, but it's much more than that. It's the heart and soul of what we do, and it's where we gather.
Listen, you speak in such the same language that many people in this room talk about, and the reason why they're here. And there are a lot of people who said to me, "Oh, do you think we spoke about getting you here, and I was so pleased when you agreed to come." And it really sort of ratifies the importance and your passion for the industry. And I know lots of people have seen you out and about and etc. But listen, the reality is I feel your passion. I understand that, and I know how important it is to you. So. I mean, you mentioned that nighttime economy is not just a sideshow, it's a cornerstone of UK economy. What does genuine recognition look like? What would you like to see? I mean, we spoke about the ministerial position. What else would you like to see?
Yeah, I think the ministerial position is really important, but I also think that too often people see businesses as all the same. They're not. And I talked about the risks that are involved, and I talked about the challenges that the nighttime economy and what they've been through. And And I think that we've got to recognise it's not even a double whammy, it's not even a triple whammy. I talked about the challenges on business rates, the challenges on VAT, the challenges, yes, the minimum wage going up and the living wage and the costs of energy. We've got to start looking at the intersectionality of all these challenges and start relieving some of them. So we've talked about a review of business rates. We've got to, as I said in speeches before, we've got to put rocket boosters on what we promised at the election and start delivering. Now, we've only had a short time in government, but I really believe that in order to get that hearing, people have to see the urgency of which the sector is facing, and that means doing pragmatic things that are going to relieve those pressures, as well as having the people in the room. They know the challenges, they also know the context to the challenges, and therefore they can help us with that. But I also think our high streets will only be saved by looking at the hospitality sector as well. People see the high street and they think it's decaying, and actually it's the hospitality sector and the nighttime economy that is really breathing life back into our communities and our high streets. So we've really got to try and think of how policies can drive that and how we can practically assist.
No, thank you. I mean, just touching on that point, I mean, you talk about a lot of policies that are generated for the sector, not with the sector, or co-design. How would you like to see that change? What would you like to see more of from that perspective?
Well, that's about the engagement as well. I think having the minister is important, but it's also about the engagement. And as I said before, businesses are not one size fits all. There's a very big difference between the family-run business in the high street, and even in some parts of the country there's big differences, as opposed to Amazon, for example. They are not same businesses and they have different challenges, and we should recognise that in policy, and we should be driving that forward and having that engagement. But as I said before, the urgency, people need to understand we're losing venues, we're losing our cultural heritage, we're losing those spots where people can come together. So we've got to do something, and we've got to have the urgency around that, because people, they understand the issues are complex, and they are. There isn't a lever that you just press. It is complex. But I also got frustrated in my reflection of my time in government is that all departments will do things and they don't always necessarily understand how one department says we're going to do this and how that has a double impact if another department is saying they're going to do something else. So having a minister and having that cross-departmental working on some of these issues, I think, is really vital as well.
No, it's massive. And just touching on one of those subjects, I mean, one of the key things that we're seeing around things like planning, you know, and how we look at speeding up those planning decisions and more partnership-based approach. I mean, we talked about licensing. There was licensing reform that came through. You know, how important is that in terms of investment and growth? I mean, we've lost a third of nightclubs. A recent report that we've done around electronic music has seen, funny enough, the North, 93% growth in electronic music events, which is amazing.
And that's not just me going there.
That's just not you going out, yeah. So, I mean, I'm really keen to hear from a planning perspective and licensing, what would you like to see?
Yeah, I mean, I know these are not things you'd expect at this type of conference to talk about licensing and planning, but these are really important structural issues, and I was incredibly frustrated at how long it takes to get through planning and the bureaucracy of it. I mean, it's soul destroying. It almost cripples you in the process, and it definitely ages you. And therefore, planning has to be more responsive. It can't be like this sort of endurance. We should be recognising what people want, what communities want, and making it easier to get through the planning process. And I think there's a way of doing that, which I said in my speech. And licensing, I'm really pleased that Sadiq, the Mayor of London, is now taking that mayoral approach to it. Because in London, look, it's like in Manchester, we don't see our local authority boundaries yet. We don't go, oh, I'm in Tameside now, I'm in Stockport. You know, people will move between those boundaries. And yet, if you've got local authorities with all different types of licensing agreements, it makes it really, really difficult. So having the mayoral approach, which, you know, Sadiq's taking up, then I think that would make it a lot easier. We just need to why do we make it so hard? You know, I know it's a struggle. We say that in our movement, it's a struggle. But we make it unnecessarily hard, and I think we just need to sort of like get through some of those. Get through some of the noise, get through some of the barriers, and just start doing things that people want to see.
Thank you. And I loved the fact that you spoke about co-design. The industry has got to be a fundamental part of these policy shifts. One thing that you mentioned that I think is dear to many, we've had many panels over the last day and continue today, and Silvana and the team have been working hard on safety initiatives around vulnerability, but it was so important for someone like yourself to highlight the vulnerability, the VORG position, particularly that you've experienced directly, and how important transport is, and safety and vulnerability in policing. You know, we talked about transport being a safety enabler. What would you like to see? How important is that for a night out from your perspective?
I think it's really important, and I want to pay tribute to people in the industry because they've done so much to make people reassured about safety in their venues and how people feel going out. And the problem seems to persist that we still don't have a joined up transport policy, and we're not working with the police again on some of these issues. And you know, there's talk of taking, you know, more staff away, and actually people want to see staff. They want to see the presence of police, or they want to see the presence of transport staff that are there. They don't want to be out at night isolated. They don't want poor lighting in areas because that makes people feel less safe. So having a joined up approach that recognises that, and you know, not just about people who want to go out at night, but also all those people that work at night, whether they're NHS workers, whether they're nighttime economy. There's a lot of people that don't work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and they need a transport system that's going to connect them. And it's especially important in areas like rural areas, because they've seen their bus routes being cut, they're seeing the opportunity. You know, we've got a by-election at the moment with a Denton train station that has one train running a day. I mean, that's no good. We've got to do more. We've got to make sure that people can see visibility of people who can help them if they need it, and they need to see that the transport is connected, is cheap, because, you know, I travel between Manchester and London. I can fly over to Europe cheaper than I can get from Manchester to London, if I'm honest, on a train. That's not cheap. We need to make sure that transport is cheap and it's connected up.
And it's, I mean, some of the challenges we have is the late night economy transport. So, you know, I have visions of my son staying out till 3 in the morning and have to sleep in a train station till 6 a.m. to get the earliest train. It's craziness. But, I mean, one of the things that I measure in terms of success, and I think it's important, is how nighttime economy can integrate into policy decisions, whether you talk about transport, safety, licensing, planning. It has a really important part to play, and the voice needs to be there, and for some reason we just don't seem to be able to intersect, so it's really important to see that support. So look, I'm going to round up, and just to leave you with a moment, and hopefully you can leave everyone here. Oh, we've got it, sorry. Mike, it's going to be a mic drop.
Pin me down now as well.
So finally, sort of, what would you say directly to the independent venue owners and operators who are still struggling to believe recovery is possible?
Well, first of all, I'd say thank you. Thank you for being the beating heart of our communities. And we've got to do better. I said it in my speech, I'm saying it passionately now. I think that we've got to move faster. I think we've identified the problems. I don't think, as you say, there is a lot of intersectionalities between what government does that has an impact on the nighttime economy. I think having those voices around the table, having that minister will help with that. But I think that, you know, it's time now to really start the delivery and understanding how you could do one policy over here and then you're doing another policy over here and then you're doing something else over there, and it's having no concept of how all of those things together are having an impact. And we've got to start putting real, tangible, pragmatic solutions, because we're losing venues. And I know, as I said in my speech, many of you are carrying the burden of that. You're carrying the burden of that when you're home. You're carrying the burden of employing staff and worrying about how you're going to pay them. And you're seeing the bureaucracy, you're seeing the rules, you're seeing the legislation that is telling you to do more. but you're not seeing the support for that recovery at the same time. And I think that's where we need to really, we said we'd review business rates, we need to get on with that, we need to do it. And the things that, you know, I've said here today, I think that we could really take them forward. You know, I'm a working class girl, we don't expect the moon on a stick, we never have. But we expect to be treated fairly and with respect, and if you play by the rules will protect you. And I think that's where people feel that they're not getting their hearing at the moment, and I think we really need to get back to that and fight to put the change in. We might not do everything everybody wants, but we can do more.
Thank you very much. And look, we're going to round up there. I just want to say a huge thank you for just taking the time in your busy schedule to come here, not only talk passionately about the nighttime economy, but understand from everyone here that we've got a supporter and someone who's going to back us at every opportunity. Can I ask everyone to put their hands together and thank you very much.
Is that right? 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1,
Ladies and gents, we'll be getting underway in the next 5-10 minutes. The mayors will be coming downstairs and we'll get underway. So please start to take your seats and look forward to having a bit of an interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention, please? We're about to get underway. Can I please bring onto stage first the Mayor of the Liverpool region? Can I get your hand, put your hands together for Steve Rotherham? It's the first time I've stumbled over my words for the last couple of days, but please grab a seat. Don't worry about the headphones. Always wrecks your hair. And our next introduction is someone I think many of you have heard and seen, and that's the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham. Can I welcome you on stage? Thank you. What's nice is these guys know each other very well, so I'm going to start with a question. I mean, I suppose the easy one is: I understand both of you are budding DJs. When's the next back-to-back for charity? If we can get that announced today, that'll make press either way. And we're quite happy to back the charity, and there are a load of people in here who'll commit to it as well.
It could be in this place, so it could be actually here. We're looking for the venue, but the one that we're definitely scheduled to do is the Philharmonic Hall. So we've gone from sort of a few hundred now. They want bigger venues. So who knows if any of us need an alternative career.
What's the score? So we've had 3, haven't we? Are we 2-1?
3-0 for Liverpool. No, look. When we do these things, just to give you the context to it, so it's for a charity. We had one in Manchester for a bed every night, didn't we, for the homeless issue, because we all need to do our part and play our part in what we can do to eradicate that.
Angela Rayner played her part that night, didn't she?
She did. She was all over social media. If anyone, just go onto your Google and put Angela Rayner and the Daily Mail, which we all believe every single word of.
Peter Reid was on your team and Rowetta was on mine, and they had a slanging match about Everton and Manchester United on stage. You remember that?
It wasn't just about football, it was about other issues that Rowetta claimed Manchester was better in every aspect bar one, and I won't go into that, but any of you later will tell you what she was on about, but she was enjoying herself.
I call for Angela to just, off the back of it, go head-to-head, whoever the winner is, and I think that's definitely a good thing. But listen, it's great to see you engaging and being a massive part of the nighttime economy as DJs, and I know both of you are advocates for nighttime economy and the culture and social economy that are represented within this room and this conference, so I really, really appreciate you giving up your time and coming and talking about it. Look, joking aside, I mean, look, we know that you're both advocates for nightlife. You've done some amazing things. And one of the things I wanted to contextually sort of ask you about, we've recently released an electronic music report that says that the north of England has seen a 93% growth in electronic music events. Are we seeing the north taking over? And what's your view on it? I'd love to hear that. Obviously 51% in terms of London, but 93% for the north of England. What's your view on it? How do you feel hearing those stats?
If you have a look at what's happening, both in Greater Manchester and Liverpool City region, so for instance, we are a UNESCO World City of Music.
They're also a one-band city, aren't they?
Yeah.
Electronic music. Now, hang on a minute. That's what we're talking about here.
Have you heard the Scouse rap?
We have quite a pedigree there. But
if you look, you've had one decade where you had decent music.
New Order blows him out of the water whenever we do our DJ battle. It's fair to say.
It's a decent one, but the likes of the Zootons with Valerie gets everybody singing. So what would rather people do? Go or sing?
But I should say, shout out to Sasha Lord, who's here somewhere today. The Warehouse Project and everything that's come out of that, and the whole culture around it, it's massive, isn't it? So, we're proud to be bossing those stats. Both of us aren't we?
Yeah, and it's genuinely, it's a good thing, isn't it? Because all you hear about is negativity. If you go onto social media, it'll be about something that is in decline. So to see growth in a very important sector to both of us and to our economies is fantastic. The one thing I would say is that whilst the headline figure is really important, underneath that there are venues that are still closing across the whole of the country, and everybody has to step up, local, national and regional, to ensure that we give those places the best possible chance of survival.
100%. And I mean, what's nice to see is that friendly rivalry between the cities, and just understanding that you're pushing each other to do better, and that's an important piece of this, I think.
I think so. I mean, the nighttime economy offer is brilliant in both places, and it has been for a long time, but there's no complacency either, though. Look at this, obviously my club has a new stadium near here. This is a fairly new venue that is packed out, obviously on match days, but other things that they're doing. There's a whole infrastructure growing around here, isn't there? In some of the old warehouses linked to the docks. Fantastic to see, and you know about Manchester's nighttime economy infrastructure. To follow up on a point Steve was just making, I think we need to consider it critical infrastructure for a city region like ours. And this change in our thinking has come through. You remember the debate about night and day and the challenges we had there, the planning issues around sound, about the sound proofing. For me, the nighttime economy brings the thing that puts the whole life into the place, and it's critical for that reason. And we need to give it the maximum protection, in my view, from a planning point of view, because once you lose it, and then you lose the vibrancy, you lose the life in your places. And I think it really is important with the mayors as we come through more and more in terms of building our city regions, that we talk about the nighttime economy in this way, not something that's just always there and it does its own thing and it's just something we take for granted. You've got to look at it the other way. These are social spaces that bring people together, that bring life, that bring joy, that bring all of the good things in life. And you've got to start, in the eyes of, if you like, the tax system, the planning system, consider them critical infrastructure for cities and towns across the north, indeed across the country. And we're not there yet, but I think coming out of gatherings like this, we need to get there with you, getting that voice louder and louder and louder, played back to Westminster to get those policy changes to reflect what I'm saying. Critical infrastructure, essential infrastructure. If it's not there, your place is probably in decline. And that's why we're here and we're so passionate about what all of you do. We know it's hard, but the fact that you do it makes all the difference to our places.
Yeah, and just to supplement that, I mean, what other industry is like £43 billion to GVA across the economy, but doesn't have a single voice? And that's where all the disparate parts of the nighttime economy do need to come together. Because it's fantastic that we've got live music venues, because we both love live music venues, and a couple of drinks sometimes when we're there. But how do you get people to and from those venues? So we're investing an awful lot as both Metro mayors in Liverpool City region and Greater Manchester, to see whether we can do more on public transport and run later night transport, public transport, so that people can get home safely as well.
Well, you said a couple of drinks, and of course I have a foot in both cities, don't I? Having some roots right here from where my family came from here.
But that's his problem. So he's half Scouse and half Mancunian. So when we go out, half of them want to get pissed, but the other half won't pay.
He's always very generous on nights out to deal with my Mancunian half.
So look, we heard from Angela Rayner earlier, and the support for representation centrally in terms of a minister with a portfolio that looks and addresses, someone who actually understands the industry. And I don't think we can measure success until both on a local government, a mayoral region position, as well as central government, that we've got integration into policy and strategy properly and represented as an industry. I want to ask you both, would you support a ministerial position centrally? I know you do a huge amount of work. The likes of Sasha and others, the commissions, music groups have been a really big part of your strategic movement. You know, would you support that sort of thing?
Yes, 100%. And I want to just develop what I was saying before and put it in the context of place-based regeneration. I know the third biggest sector, I think I'm right in saying, in the country. For us, 500,000 people just under work in it, so it's massive. But I want to put it in the context of what we're trying to do to revive places, towns around the city as well as the city. Because for us, it makes all the difference when you're trying to sort of turn around a place that's a bit neglected, to bring in those social venues, to make those places live beyond 5 o'clock in the evening. If you're trying to turn around a place like Stockport, where we've had a mayoral development corporation, you have to build that nighttime economy. You know, we've had lots of policy debate in this country over the years about how the high street and how do you turn around a town. Well, we have done it in Stockport, and we think now that is the template for how you do it. And we've been developing this idea of mayoral development corporations now. We're bringing one forward in Middleton, led by Steve Coogan and Rose Marley. We're bringing one forward in Bolton, Ashton, Staley Bridge, so Angela Rayner's area. And it's a really interesting thing where you really get into the detail of this. What we want is your industry with us in those areas. We don't necessarily want betting shop after betting shop or tanning salon or okay, some people use those things, but they don't bring the footfall, they don't bring the life, they don't actually employ as many people as your industry employs. And we've got a really interesting thing going on in Farnworth at the moment, where we've worked with a developer called Capital and Centric to make a entirely new living space in the heart of a town like Farnworth, where Tim Heatley, who runs it, is holding out for nighttime economy businesses to take his units rather than give them away to other uses that won't bring the life. And it's a really important point about your industry and the unique thing you bring to town and city centre regeneration. And for that reason, I do think a minister is needed, but I do think special protection in planning law is needed, and we've got that in our planning framework now. But I also think a tax regime that reflects what I've just said is needed, both in terms of business rates and VAT, because of the extra contribution the industry makes to the wider economy in an area. And that very much is the way I see it, and I'm sure Steve sees it too. You could pick up the theme here, Prescott with Shakespeare North and the whole regeneration that's come in there. We're starting to see in the Liverpool City region of Greater Manchester the great things of the city starting to move out into the boroughs, aren't we?
And that's why it's so important to have a holistic overview of what you're trying to achieve. So for us, our strategy is that we look at what's happening in different sectors we try to help by supporting those sectors and planning those sectors, and then we bring in, as I say, things like public transport. But the one thing that it does do that is probably an intangible, more nebulous thing for us to measure is it can change the reputation of a place.
Do you remember, it's a Sefton Council, isn't it, who launched a new music festival that we went to, didn't we?
Town.
Yeah, yeah. And I know my family come from Bootle, or my brother was born in Bootle, so I know Bootle really, really well. And you know, the Strand shopping centre has seen better days. Well, it hadn't done it. But credit to the council, they were really, trying to start the turnaround. But do you remember that pub we went into during the first Salt and Tar? Do you remember it was your culture advisor tried to order a drink and tell everybody what because it shows you some of the challenges you have when you're starting this journey of turning a place around.
So we went to see a band called Red Rum Club, who were absolutely fantastic, but it just happened to be a monsoon and it's an outdoor venue. So we were soaked right the way through. The closest pub at the time was the Mayflower, if anybody knows that, and it's an interesting place, isn't it, the Mayflower? So I don't know whether Kevin Mack's here, but if anyone's from Liverpool, you know who Kevin Mack is. And when we went,
he's very refined, isn't he, Kevin?
Very refined
tastes.
Yeah.
And
so I said to him, "What do you want?" And so we ordered the beers, and then he said to Kevin, "What do you want?" And he said, "I'll have a wine." So I said to the barmaid, "Can I have a wine, please?" And she said, "Red or white?" So I said to Kevin, "Red or white?" He said, "White, please." So I said, "White." And then he says to me, "What type is it?" So I said, "Excuse me, what type is it?" And she said, "It's fucking white, I've just told you." So, but that didn't turn us off. I just think that was a brilliant thing, So we were waiting.
It's gentrified the Mayflower.
Yeah. So we were waiting to go next time because we thought this is brilliant.
Listen, I could leave you two on stage just to carry on the conversation without a doubt, but I'm going to sort of start to nail down a couple of... Listen, it's very hard not to talk about devolution, and both of you guys getting the opportunity to have a greater say at a local level. And I think many of our industry want people with local knowledge to be making decisions, particularly around the nighttime economy. We understand the empowering moment that could bring about, particularly with people or leadership that are very focused on nighttime economy and supporting the industry that we have felt have been a huge part, been overtaxed, overburdened in many respects. So I'm really keen to hear from both of you about that devolution position.
Yes, I think hopefully you feel that devolution is good for the nighttime economy, and as mayors come through in all places, your voice is getting a bit stronger because we all see the power of you, perhaps in a way that Westminster-based politicians don't see it in the same way. So I think that is really coming through. If I think about Manchester and where we are now, Steve loves me saying this. We are the fastest growing city region in the UK. Heard that once or twice before, but Liverpool city region growing faster than the UK. So devolution is bringing that change. If I go back though to my youth, I think it was the music scene of the 80s that began the turnaround of Manchester. It wasn't anything else because the industry was leaving, things were closing, the place felt moribund from that point of view. But obviously into old spaces like this, the music industry came in and lifted, and he knows what I'm saying down there, Gareth. But it's true. It put heart and belief and pride back in a way that it had been stripped out by the deindustrialisation that we'd lived through. And this is the point that I think really needs to be understood from a policy level. We talk about growth as a country. We talk about turning around neglected places. It cannot be done, in my view, but it could be done in a very different way, but not in as vibrant a way by other industries. I think your industry makes all the difference. And I do think, beyond the minister, we need, as I say, a planning and tax regime that recognises that value added to the UK economy. And I'm including the music industry in this and live venues, as Steve was saying. And actually, the wider hospitality industry. I know pubs have got their business rates exemption. But it should be broader than that. I think it should be all hospitality venues, because you want that mixed economy as well. That's an important thing. It's not one version of the nighttime economy. Sometimes when places have one version of the nighttime economy, that doesn't actually help that sort of more broader regeneration. Stalybridge, I mentioned, used to be called Staley Vegas for a period in Greater Manchester. It's still known as that to a lot of people. And it's great because everyone remembers going there. But in the end, it's not necessarily that broader offer that has, that type of place, but also more of a cultural offer, restaurant. You want the whole mix of the nighttime economy in play. And that's why I think we need to get away from a fragmented approach to tax and have a broader approach that recognises the employment benefit, or particularly the regeneration benefit.
And it does contribute a huge amount to Treasury. So our visitor economy is worth £6.27 billion a year, and a lot of that is where we raise taxes that go into the national exchequer, which is a good thing if we see a return on some of that taxation. And we've got, through devolution, we've got something called an LVEP now, Local Visitor Economy Partnership, and it's headed by Lord Hall, who's used to be with the BBC, people who remember him, but he's from Birkenhead. So we've got people now coming back to areas like ours who understand the sector and have pulled together people like John and others who understand the nighttime economy as part of that wider offer. And that means then we can start to get the ducks in order, because we do invest in our visitor economy huge sums of money, but it needs to be influenced by people who understand that. I don't have anything to do with giving funding out. That is through the bids that come in. And we need a strong voice from the visitor economy, because we've got so many competing interests that if we don't have that, then other people will shout louder, and that means that money will probably go in their direction.
It's worth us just saying something, though, isn't it, about the arrival of the overnight visitor levy, because you may have seen some reference to this confirmed in the last budget, and obviously it goes by the name tourist tax as well, and probably you'll think, oh God, another thing that might cause us a challenge. I would want you just to think about it the other way round. For both of us, I mean, the visitors we both get linked to music and football and other things, it's huge. And we've faced the job then of putting the transport on to cope with those visitor numbers, to put the policing on to cope with those visitor numbers. If we were only to pay for that through the council tax, that would actually be unfair to the residents of the two city regions. And therefore it is right to ask people who are coming and using our services to pay that kind of charge that you pay, routinely in France or Germany, a few pounds. I've never resented paying it whenever I've been asked to pay it, and I don't think people do. But what that will do is create a fund for us that will be very focused on the visitor experience and actually raise the game of the place in which you're based. So I'll give you an example. Night buses. I've reintroduced night buses in Greater Manchester as part of the B network. So we've got them going to Lee and Bolton, Bury, through Prestwich and Rochdale. You've got some coming back as well, haven't you? I think you've reintroduced some. The trams are running till 1 o'clock at weekends now. Sasha was big in bringing about that change when he was our nighttime economy advisor. That is the kind of change that the visitor levy will be able to support. All the extra policing later that then helps your venues feel different later on. So I do just mention that because devolution is bringing something that could help the industry, and work with us is all I would say on that, because we need your ideas about how that funding could best be spent.
And we want to use it for additionality as well. So we want to look at how we can make things more attractive so that you get more footfall, more visitors, more overnight stays, more bed nights, all of that, which all helps to grow an economy. And we can't do that by hoping at some stage you're going to have a benevolent government who's just going to say, oh, do you know what, Andy or Steve, here's some additional funding. We're not going to get it through that.
I think the one thing, and I was on a call with some of your team, Andy, the other day, talking about Bev Craig as well, talking about the visitor economy. I think the important thing that was really resonating around is everyone looks at it as an investment in the customer or consumer journey, particularly the visitor economy and the infrastructural piece. There's a lot of people talking about co-design, and I think the important thing that we really need to harness is an engagement in policy decisions which are not built for the industry but are with the industry, which I think is a really important part that's lacking in central government. But I think local government, I know both of you advocate for that, but I really want to hear how important it is for the industry to be a fundamental part of the direction of policy in both of your regions.
Yeah, I think it's a really important question, that. And Bev Craig, leader of Manchester City Council, is leading a task force for us on all of this right now. And, I think Bev has brought a real change in terms of prioritisation on these things. I think there's been stages of how the industry's been treated, and you'll know this better than Steve and I, but there was a period when you could say neglected completely. In our case, the Hacienda just closing down and no one really understanding its value and all of that. And you had those issues here, didn't you, with the cavern years ago. So there was that era. Then I think we're probably in the current era, which is where you probably feel a bit done to, where you wait for budgets and you wait for things and it never quite meets what you were hoping, or you just feel there's another thing you're having to cope with, and I can understand how that probably feels. We've got to try and get it to a third era beyond that, which is about empowering you, your voice being in the mix with us at the regional level, but also then together we amplify the calls to the national level that are stronger. And I'm not saying this just because we're here. I don't think either of us are doing this. 10 years as mayor, both of us have lived 10 years now. This sector brings the gold dust, doesn't it? I mean, it brings the visitors, it brings everything. If we didn't have what we've got and what we're lucky to have, then our city regions would be nowhere near where we would want them to be. So that's the case for that special case, the exemptions that I've been calling about. And I think we've got to kind of, together coming out of events like this, kind of turn it into that sort of different policy sphere, when your role in regeneration, turning around neglected places, is like really understood at the national level. I don't think we're there yet, but I think there's incremental progress towards that point.
One of our responsibilities is obviously economic growth, and one of the areas that we know we can grow further is the likes of the visitor economies. We only have to do things a little bit more in scale, and what we can start to see is the impact of that on our productivity levels across the whole of the north and beyond. So the wait for a national government, as I say, to be benevolent is not the right approach. What we need to do is to find ways in which we could look at what we have indigenously, and obviously Manchester's got that fantastic Manchester air and all that. We need to capitalise on that. And
did you see his gritted teeth there? Or, I think they were probably on show.
I like the buzzcocks, but that's about it. But what we can do locally in our city region is to look at that broad depth of different musical genres. As I say, there's a bit of...
We mustn't trade on the past, because you do a thing, don't you? Bands on the run. I used to do a Mayor's Band of the Month. I think one of the things that we've got to get better about is people of our age I will talk about the 80s incessantly, and that Manchester music scene of then.
But people always say, well, what can I do? Everybody here is on social media, I bet you. And yet when we put things like music or my music on social media channels, it doesn't cost anybody here a single cent to press like. So we can support in a different way.
We're
waiting for those bands to break through. Some of them, if anyone's heard the Quayside, by the way, brilliant.
Well, we did an event, didn't we, at Shakespeare North, where I took a band, actually electronic dance, K Estate. Check them out, everyone. K Estate from Middleton, Grace Manchester, all of them. Quayside came, so we had me and him were at Shakespeare North with the two bands, and I would put the call out to all of you today. If you came to us saying we want to do a new talent night and having a range of bands, we'd be there, wouldn't we? And I kind of feel sometimes maybe give us more, call for
Challenge
those.
us.
Yeah, because I think the risk is we talk too much about the nostalgia and not enough about the now. And it's hard for some of these bands to get noticed these days. And we try, don't we? But if we just work more together on that, I think we could do something better. Because they're trying, but they don't get the same profile. And the kind of challenge of working class talent breaking through these days is much harder, I think, than it was in the 60s, 70s or 80s. And I think together with you, we need better, newer, more innovative ways of platforming them.
And that's why it's important about some of these smaller venues. We need to keep them. They're part of the ecosystem. Hopefully bands do start there and then progress all the way through. Without that sort of tier, that strata, and we're missing out, and people have got to then go to places like this and hope to sell it out. But if you're just starting out, as we all know, you need that step to get to those dizzy heights.
I think it's important to recognise, look, grassroots, whether you talk about electronic, whether you talk about live, are vitally important, and we've got to revitalise it. We've got to do as much as we can to support. I mean, there were two other points I really wanted to sort of address. We've obviously gone through the licensing reform. We represented on the central government cabinet piece on looking at licensing reform in terms of the recommendations. We know London is piloting. The importance of licensing being more permissive and enabling is vital, I believe, for our industry. But that has to be coupled with planning that is much easier, less complex or complicated. And the timelines to encourage growth and investment are vital. What did you say about that sort of devolution position where we're seeing London as a trial mechanism? How much would you welcome the opportunity to have a greater control on licensing and planning within your regions?
So the thing about devolution is that we agreed this right at the very beginning, where local authorities don't disappear, and that means that devolution for us is about taking power away from Whitehall and Westminster and not from our local authorities, who would genuinely, I think, have a knee-jerk reaction if we started to say that we were the people who were responsible for those functions that currently sit with councils. But we can work better with councils, there's no doubt about it. So the simplification stuff that we're trying to do is not just on the nighttime economy or on venues or on planning, it's right the way across the piece. We've currently got 6 local authorities, all from the same political persuasion, and they're from the same political persuasion, and we're trying to cut through some of that, the more onerous side of the regulation. So the bit that the Tories sometimes call red tape, and the reason that I won't is because they said, for instance, at Grenfell, that was about red tape. Look what happens when you don't put safeguards in place. So I want to get rid of the unnecessary stuff, the duplication, and where, for instance, a different a venue or a venue owner would have different regulations in the 6 local authority areas in one place. That doesn't sound sensible to me.
And in Greater Manchester, just to pick up on that, what some people call red tape point of view, we've obviously supported Fegan Murray all the way with Martin's Law, and I can see Fegan here today. So I think there's a balance, isn't there, when we think about licensing reform and making it easier and reducing sort of regulatory burdens. I understand those calls, but at the same time, from what we live through in the city, you want absolute clarity as a parent as to what is the level of security at a different size of venue. And Martin's Law was something that I spoke about at a previous gathering like this, and I think there was scepticism, but it's really important. I think part of this is about raising the quality of what we do, helping you for the reasons I've been given this afternoon, but also just raising the standard of a British night out as well. And we all know there's probably more work to keep doing there. And it isn't just the physical changes, it's Ask for Angela and the training that comes with that. And I know many of you are absolutely brilliant with that. But, again, there's always more that can be done. Some of the spiking issues that we've seen in our cities, there's, again, more that can be done. So it's a case of a quid pro quo all of the time, isn't it? Getting rid of unnecessary stuff, speeding things up for you, but at the same time, you know, saying, right, we're going to help, but we also have these standards that we need to maintain.
I just want to mention the purple flag system that we've got, because Liverpool has it. We're talking about standardisation. We want all of our local authorities and all of those venues to have the same sort of safety and security processes in place. And I think that gives you then an indication of a place that you could go where safety is paramount, because that should be our number one overriding concern.
100%. And we resonate here as a trade organisation, and many people know about it over the last couple of days have been speaking about it. I mean, look, it's going to be very difficult, or it'd be remiss of me to not take the opportunity to sort of tackle the tax burden situation that we're sat in. There is no doubt we need to be treated as a stronger value within communities, and I think both of you do that very well and advocate heavily. Without a doubt, we've seen taxation go through the roof, whether we talk about national insurance contribution, business rates, and a multitude of other things, including minimum wage, etc. And there is no doubt there is more outside of the fiscal environment to do in terms of infrastructure around transport, safety, etc. The big thing to us is representation is key, both central government and also local or mayoral office level. What I would ask of you is, would you back something like that? But also, many people, when I explained that I was going to come up and get on stage with you guys, similar to with Angela earlier, many people are calling for a VAT cut. Is that something that you would back as leaders of major regions within this country?
Yes.
We have done previously.
Absolutely.
So we did it on the last lot. So you can't say because the complexion of a government's changed that all of a sudden you're not going to ask for the same sort of things that we did under the Tories and the Labour. People need to understand what this is about. It's not necessarily a cut, is it? It give a boost to the industry. That's the most important thing to get growth.
We'd be hypocritical if we sat up here today and said everything we thought everybody wanted to hear. We're not going to call for the disapplication of the national minimum wage from this industry, are we? And if anything, we would be putting a call out to you to join the Good Employment Charter in Greater Manchester or the Fair Work Charter here in Liverpool. It's basically the same thing. You know, I think we can and should say we want employment standards to rise in the industry. You know, the whole question of staff getting home at the end of a night is an issue we would want to talk to you about. If we're putting on public transport with more safety features built in, which is what we're doing with Travel Safe live chat in Greater Manchester, you know, we want to talk to you about that. Or if someone's working really late, a taxi if there's no public transport available.
But not just a taxi, a safe taxi. So we're looking at the out of area working, and some of those people who've got licences in safe areas, but they wouldn't have got them in our area.
Let's just make that really clear for people who don't know. If you go around the streets here or in Manchester, you will see Wolverhampton taxis everywhere, and you know we can't vouch for the process. Or where's the enforcement? They're not coming up from Wolverhampton every night here to enforce. So this call needs to be heard nationally. You know, we need to raise the standards of what we're doing as a country, particularly when it comes to safety on a night out, because it links back to what Fegan has achieved with Martin's Law. We need an end to out-of-area working. We need taxis that are licensed here, trusted by the people here. And that is all part of raising our game, as well as looking after people more who work in the nighttime economy. But again, back to the quid pro quo, what do we then do in return for you? I would, and I'm sure you would, Steve, argue for a VAT rate more consistent with what you find in Europe, because of the social value that your businesses bring to places and towns that need that life injected into them. I personally would support permanently a lower business rates regime for hospitality businesses for exactly the same reason. Because if you go back to that Farnworth example, where there's a row of empty shops waiting to be filled, linked to that amazing new development, if those lower rates were in place, immediately there's an incentive for your businesses to come in and fill those spaces. And that brings benefits to not just the new residents in those places, but the older residents that are using those places during the daytime as well. So That's what we want, I think, here. Raising the standard together of everything that we're doing as a country. Nowhere in the world does this stuff better than us, but we can't be complacent about it, because we all know there's areas where we could raise our game. So why don't we do that? Why don't we raise our game? But it's about going to Whitehall, I think, for the next budget round with a really evidence-based, work-through proposal about a tax regime for hospitality and the nighttime economy that kind of puts a firm foundation underneath you. You know where you're working, but then we can legitimately say to you, and by the way, though, these are the safety standards and the employment standards that we want to see in your industry. I hope that sounds fair. I think that's what we should work towards.
Thank you. Well, I'm just going to say this. It's almost like it's not been an interview, it's been a double act, to be fair, and I've loved having you here. Thank you so much for your continued support and your advocacy for our industry.
And if anybody wants to hire this double act, we are available, aren't we, for booking?
And
Could be
DJs.
soon. We did write a book together, if you didn't know, called Head North. It's all about when we left Westminster. And I just need to say to you today, the sequel, Head South, is currently on hold, but who knows, it might be available at some point in the future.
Thank you very much. Can everyone put their hands together, please, for Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham? Ladies and gents, if you can just hang around for a few minutes, we might have a bit of a surprise for you. Yeah, fine. Ladies and gents, can you just take your seat? I'm just going to introduce Mr. Stephen Brains from He, She, They. I'm going to hand over to him now.
Yeah. You might recognise this lovely man next to me. So we've heard from Angela Rayner today, Andy Burnham today, and we're about to hear from the man that, if the polls carry on with the trajectory that he's on, might well be our next Prime Minister. So this is the lovely Zach Polanski, leader of the Green Party. So Zach, unlike a lot of other political leaders of the bigger parties, you've got a CV that revolves around the arts and the nighttime economy. Can you just give us a little snapshot of some of the jobs that you've done in the nighttime economy?
Yeah, lots of people will know that politics wasn't part of my plan, so I spent a lot of time being an actor. And for anyone who's been a working, jobbing actor, that actually means you work in hospitality. And so I spent a lot of time working as a barman, a waiter. I was a nightclub promoter for a few years. I was doing guest lists at Heaven and GAY for about 5-6 years. And then doing lots of standing out in the street in the evenings, promoting clubs and trying to get people to stop me in the street. Funnily enough, people say to me all the time, being a politician must be really hard. And like, it's a responsible job, I take it responsibly. But actually, I've never had a harder job of working in hospitality, when people are having a great time around you and you're trying to remember someone's order, you're trying to get something done. So huge love to everyone who's working in hospitality and keeping things moving.
It's great to have someone who's actually going to be in a position of power that actually understands us and knows us. And unlike a lot of politicians who've actually been into a nightclub in recent times and seen it, I was lucky enough to be at the event you had in Heaven, because my partner Bradley Skeng was DJing, and it was amazing seeing you not just be there for a politician in and out for 2 minutes, but dancing and enjoying the music and speaking to the bar staff and everyone there. And I think that message of hope, where you've got 120,000 new members, is really carried through. But importantly for all of us, what hope can the Green Party bring to the nighttime economy at a time where it's quite dark for some of us?
Yeah, I mean, there's never been more of a need for hope. I should say, when we were at Heaven that night, Jeremy Joseph, who's the owner of Heaven, who I used to work for, he told The Guardian that I was a terrible barman, but a great member of staff, but I'm still resentful about that. And I think there's lots that need doing. We're in a moment where people's rent is going up, people's bills are going up, but wages have been stuck in 2008, and for so many people, it feels like they're running just to keep up. And we know that's the same situation. In fact, it's even exacerbated for people who run nightclubs, bars, restaurants. This hasn't been helped over and over again by some of the decisions by the government, particularly around business rates, energy bills being a huge issue for any businesses, but particularly bad for the nighttime economy. And then there's a whole discussion I really appreciate in your manifesto. I was just saying this, that we're talking about the difference between regulation and promotion. Now look, I'm not going to sit on this stage as tempting as it would be and say, let's just deregulate, we don't need any regulation. There's really big need for regulation in the whole sector, as there is in many sectors, to keep people safe, including employers, employees, and local residents. But it can't be all about regulation, and actually we need promotion. We know how much the nighttime economy benefits the UK economy, billions and billions and billions of pounds.
136 billion pounds.
Right, absolutely huge, going straight into the Treasury.
And 2 million employees.
Right, exactly. Now, you often, well not often, but sometimes politicians make the economic arguments. I'm actually just as interested in the humanitarian arguments. If we're running a society that is just about just the public services working or just getting by, fine, we've got humanity can survive. But what about thriving? What about absolute love, being around the people we love, being with our friends, our neighbours, our community? We're seeing the worrying rise of the far right, and I genuinely think that nightclubs, theatre, art, music is a huge part of the antidote, because what you're doing is allowing people to collectively get together and tell a different story. Right now, the right really want us to believe that change isn't possible, that it always has to be this way, that it always will be this way. And one of the ways we can demonstrate it doesn't have to be this way is creating alternative ideas of what the future could look like. And I genuinely think when you're in a club or in an art space, that's exactly the time where creatives can get together and envisage a better future. Whether that's obviously on tackling the climate crisis, tackling poverty, or anti-racism strategy. All of that can happen through having a really good nighttime economy. To do that, we need a strategy, and that's why every local authority should have a nighttime economy strategy. The last thing I'd say, because I realise it's a long answer, I used to live in...
You're very good.
I used to live in Atlanta, Georgia, and more specifically Athens, Georgia. Athens, Georgia is really famous for its music scene. And I was there as a student, and sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning, you could wander into a cafe, like a late night coffee shop. You'd have a musician on a piano just playing away. You'd have people working there, they're all in jobs. But because you've got nighttime cafes open, it would mean that there would be street lights at night, which means safer streets at night. It would mean there would need to be public transport to get there anyway. That's also good because it's accessible and affordable. There would be toilets people can access at night. Good for me in the cafe, but more importantly, good for those transport workers, for the cleaners of the streets, for the people who are keeping our cities running. And so having a nighttime economy that thrives just means your city doesn't just shut down at 10 p.m. and actually can keep going all through the night, creating an economy, creating a thriving economy, looking after people, and creating less stress on the daytime economy because it spreads things across 24 hours. It just makes sense on every single level.
So when I said that he understands us, he actually does understand us, which is great. So one of the things that